So in the last video was predicted a catastrophic collapse in the price of this HEX Ponzi token. And it's pretty much what happened. We saw about an 85% drawdown from peak to peak. And I'd call that catastrophic. Now here's what happened. And here's where plans changed. Originally, everyone was supposed to get this big payday. Well, the big payday didn't really happen as planned for everyone, particularly the Bitcoin free claimers. They were shorted pretty heavily on what they thought they would get, and which was pretty smart by a dictator in charge and owner of most of the HEX Ponzi token, Richard Hart. It was a pretty good move on his part to limit the amount of selling pressure that the Bitcoin free claimers could impose on the very small and illiquid Uniswap V2 HEX market. And that's exactly what he did. He removed their ability to sell a lot of coins. And as such, what I was thinking would be 90% plus drawdown, maybe 95%. It only turned out to be about 85%, because he simply eradicated the selling pressure. It was smart. It was a good thing to do. I think it made a lot of people angry. But, some of these simulations that were done that showed, people getting 100x gains and stuff over 10 years, a lot of that stuff was just totally obliterated by what happened with what a lot of people will call the big payday rug pull. In a way, it sort of was. I think a lot of those simulations were expecting that there wouldn't be a majority staking in the way that they did. So, anyway, so the big payday is over, and it seems that the selling pressure is also over. It's really important to note that the Bitcoin free claimers did not have a ton of ammo to throw at the market. They didn't have a ton of ability to cash out. They had a good, bit, but they didn't have the 2 or 3x that was originally per claim, that people originally thought they would get. They got maybe, 0.5x, where they originally thought they were going to get about 3x on their money. They got 0.5x. So there wasn't a ton of selling pressure out of them, and it seems that the selling pressure from those guys is probably subsided. Don't see much more coming out of those guys. So that being said, what's next? What is the future? Where does this go from here? I think it's pretty obvious that this thing goes up. It seems likely to go up. You see, the thing about HEX is it doesn't seem to be... It's actually I think it's a better Ponzi scheme than Bitcoin, to be quite honest. The Achilles heel right now of Bitcoin, probably even Ethereum, is they're totally reliant on tether printing for their prices to go up. And they rely on a lot of tether printing to create artificial demand, which will hopefully pull in real demand so that the people that are creating the artificial demand can cash out into real dollars. HEX doesn't have this problem. It doesn't have this tether printing chain around its neck. The liquidity is so tiny, and the market is so tiny. It doesn't need all that. You got to remember, there's only, if everybody in the entire HEX market, which is probably not a lot of people, but if everybody decided to cash out, which they can't because their tokens are locked up, but if they did want to cash out, there's only $6 million to cash out into. That's it. Think about all the millions of dollars that were taken in through the adoption amplifier. All that money is gone. All that money that came in through the Ethereum that came in through the adoption amplifier, it's gone. It's gone. And maybe it will be used for manipulation in the future. I kind of doubt it, but it could be. Maybe it's going to be used for life extension research. Who knows? Who knows what that Ethereum is going to be used for? But it's gone. And now the market is having to support itself through what appears to be free market forces, for better or worse. Where am I going with this? So anyway, $6 million to cash everybody out. And this doesn't appear to be growing tremendously. And as people's collection of HEX increases over the years, you've either got to have a lot of money in that Uniswap to cash people out, or the price is going to go down. But in the meantime, I think that the majority of stakes are set out pretty long. I think it's like a mean of 4 or 5 years. So I think until then, and until there's any kind of significant selling pressure, which doesn't appear to, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. The price just go up. It's so easy to manipulate this market. It's so easy to boost the price up. It's just, there's not much to it. 50 cents, end of 2022. I'd be really surprised if HEX did not go to 50 cents by the end of 2022. Amazingly surprised. I do not think that it is, unless I'm missing something. I did miss something. I missed the whole thing with Richard Hart obliterating the big payday and rug pulling on everybody. I missed that. I did not see that coming. I didn't think he would do that. I didn't think that he would, frankly, upset people to that degree. But, it is what it is. So there may be something else that I'm missing. But I don't think that it can stay at this 50 cent price valuation that it's almost certainly going to go to. I don't think it can stay at 50 cents for 10 years. I would say that'd be borderline impossible. And maybe it could, but it would take some kind of crazy frenzy like what happened in Bitcoin between 2016, 2017. It would take that kind of frenzy. Could it happen? Maybe. It's also possible that the market continues to remain very small. And there's this staker app now that will tell you how much money you're going to lose if you do an emergency in stake early. And I think they will probably integrate a selling component to that app. And in 10 years, these people who have millions and millions of coins staked, if they want to cash out, assuming the market remains pretty small like it is right now, they're going to move the market. So I would assume that they'll integrate into that app a system that alerts the seller as to how much they're going to move the market. And there will probably be a mechanism that limits people to only selling, say, 1% of their stack and stake the rest. That's going to have to be the mantra going forward to keep this Ponzi alive. It's going to have to be socially reprehensible for people to sell their stack. You only allowed to sell just a little bit, maybe 1% or just the interest or something like that, and then restake the rest. Because if people decide that they're going to cash out their entire stakes and just get out of the system, get out of the cult, everybody can't do that. There's simply not enough liquidity to cash everybody out. Again, this is a full-fledged, classic Ponzi scheme. There is absolutely no question about it. The definitions that people involved in HEX use to describe Ponzi schemes, such as quote-unquote promises, the word promise does not exist in the Webster's dictionary definition of what a Ponzi scheme is. It's nothing about promises. It's very simply where new people cash out the old. It's that simple. And that is the only purpose of HEX at all, is to sell your coins to another person for a higher price. And I actually want to get into this now that we're standing here talking about this, about what is a Ponzi scheme. People want to argue with me about Ponzi schemes all the time. And they want to tell me, Well, if the purpose is to sell to another person for a higher price, they say every investment is a Ponzi scheme. And they say no, that's absolutely not the case. So we'll go through several examples that people use. The first example people use is stocks. They want to say that all stocks are Ponzi schemes. I got some rain on my lens right here. Sprinkling just a little bit. They want to say that stocks are a Ponzi scheme. Well, some stocks are. Stocks that do not pay a dividend. Here's the thing. They at least have a hope of paying a dividend. So a stock that doesn't pay a dividend, that can never pay a dividend, yeah, that's a Ponzi scheme for sure. But at least a stock has the hope of eventually paying a dividend. And that's the purpose of stocks. The purpose of stocks is to buy a stake in a profitable company and get paid dividends from real production or real services or real value adds to the world. The purpose of that stock is not to sell to a higher person. The purpose of the stock is to hold it for years and decades and collect dividends. So real estate's another good example. Real estate can be Ponzi-like in nature. You know, some people will buy real estate just to sell it for a higher price. That would definitely be an attribute of a Ponzi scheme. But generally, real estate is bought so that it can either be used, lived in, or so that it can be rented to someone else and generate an income. So it has an actual use at rest. It generates an income for the person that is renting it out. Another example is gold. You know, people want to say that gold is a Ponzi scheme. Well, no, it's not entirely true. The purpose of gold is not solely to buy it and to sell it to a greater fool for a higher price. And the reason being is that gold itself has intermediary uses. One of them being jewelry. You cannot underestimate the jewelry value of gold. It is quite a big component of gold's usage worldwide. I think it's around 50%. So when someone buys jewelry, they don't buy it generally so that they can sell it later for a higher price. They buy it so that they can wear it, so that they can enjoy it, so that they can pass it off to later generations, so that they can have it and enjoy it, and all these things. And if you don't understand jewelry, you know, talk to some people that do understand jewelry, that do like it, that do express demand for it, and talk to women. You know, women tend to like jewelry. Ask them why they value it. They don't generally buy their jewelry to sell it off to somebody else for a higher price, so that it doesn't exhibit the classic symptoms of a Ponzi scheme. Also, it has a very minor amount of industrial use. Gold does. It's not a ton, but it's some. It's they line the inside of space helmets with gold and things like that to keep out electromagnetic. Well, not really electromagnetic, more ultraviolet radiation. I guess it probably does keep out other types of radiation as well, but probably to a much lesser extent. Probably keeps the heat out too. Anyway, it's just a shield of all types. I don't know exactly what types of radiation it keeps out, but it keeps out some. Anyway, it's also used to store wealth. People use gold to store wealth because it does have uses other than monetary uses. So, for that reason, gold is not a Ponzi scheme. I'm trying to think of what else people might. So we can go into why Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme. You know, the only purpose of Bitcoin is to either give it to somebody else or to sell it for a higher price. That's it. People buy Bitcoin for the sole reason of dumping to a greater fool for later in the future. It's classic Ponzi finance. I mean, it's a brilliant scheme, and to be honest, HEX is a more brilliant scheme than Bitcoin, and we've gone over this in the past. The reason why Bitcoin is not the best Ponzi scheme and why it needs Tether to prop it up is because you're constantly paying the electric companies all of the money that the Ponzi generates. It's like you're taking all of the inflows that come into the Ponzi scheme and you're flushing it down the toilet. Like, that's not a good way to run a Ponzi scheme. You don't do it that way. HEX is a much better Ponzi scheme because the money that comes into it, well, I don't know. It is better, but it still has some flaws. The downside is most of the money that came into HEX was also flushed down the toilet. It went into Richard Hart's pockets, most of it. It didn't go into boosting the system. So there's this other coin called Axion, I think is what it's called, that tries to overcome this negative aspect of the HEX Ponzi, in that all of the money that comes into Axion, supposedly with their Ponzi, they take that money and pump it back into the coin itself in order to boost the price. That's a better Ponzi scheme, but that doesn't benefit a single person. So it doesn't benefit a single creator. With the HEX Ponzi scheme, it's most of that money went in to benefit a specific person. But there's a good sign. The project has not been abandoned. All the ETH that has been collected, who knows where it went? Probably maybe went to buy a new house, who knows? Or a new city. But HEX itself seems to be being engaged. That rug pull thing that happened, where the big payday was pulled from everybody. The only reason that happened is because Richard has a long-term interest in the project. He wouldn't have done that if he didn't have a long-term interest in the project. And of course he has a long-term interest in the project because he owns 85% of the supply. And that was a great thing that the rug pull proved. It proved that that single guy, that he owns 85% of the network. So he definitely has an interest in keeping it going. It's, there's something that people say they want to, and I don't know why they say this, but they want to say that HEX is a trustless protocol. Could not be further from the truth. There is a single entity that can dump this thing to zero on demand. And it's not trustless, folks. It is very, very far from being trustless. You're putting in a lot of trust into this one person not dumping. And it may, here's the thing, there's another aspect of this, is the regulatory environment for these Ponzi schemes is starting to look very, very, very bad. I'd say that it's probably at least 90% certain that within 10 years from now, when a lot of these stakes are coming due, that you will not be able to claim these stakes in the United States. I do not see that happening. The United States regulatory environment with these Ponzi schemes is just, even the stable coins, they're going to regulate the ever-living mess out of these stable coins. And that's only the beginning. Ripple's getting sued by the SEC for being an illegal security. The stable coins are probably going to be seen as unregistered securities as well. And then who knows what's going to happen to the other ones, like Ethereum and things like that. People in the United States are going to have a very tough time with this in 10 years, I believe. If they do have a lot of money and they are lucky enough to be able to get out before the herd, they may have to go overseas and live somewhere else if they want to cash it out legally. And that's the thing, I've had guys, and the reason I'm making this video is people still reach out to me all the time talking about HEX, all the time. So here we are. But people have done some very thorough analysis of what the HEX landscape is going to look like in 10 years. And as I've said in my last video, there absolutely, there's not going to be, unless something crazy happens, there's not going to be enough liquidity to cash all these stakes out. It's just not going to be there. So that's why I said that there's going to have to be a social rule instilled where people are only allowed to cash out, maybe 1% or something like that. Otherwise, they're just going to take out the market. There's no market there. There's just no market there. Now, can this change? Maybe. I didn't foresee the rug pull thing happening on big payday. So there could be something unforeseen that could come. And with the way the U.S. dollar is looking, the way that they're printing all this money and all these helicopter drops and giving everybody stimulus checks and stuff like that, the U.S. dollar may be in such dire straits by that point that people may flood into these Ponzi schemes. And the thing is, as sad as it is, it's very obvious that people are so technologically and financially illiterate that they cannot grasp that these cyberdust currencies are Ponzi schemes. They can't understand it, and they'll just pile into it. Especially people, my age and younger. A lot of these people have been addicted to video games their entire life. They have no grasp of what's real and what's make-believe anymore. Anything. They believe that video game money has value to them and all this stuff. Warcraft gold, you can go way down the rabbit hole with that. But these people, they've been so used to using debit cards and credit cards and stuff, and they've been using digital currency their entire life. That's what a debit card is. It's a digital currency. It just doesn't waste electricity to secure itself, but it's essentially the same thing in practice. And so, hey, what's the difference? They've been using these credit cards their whole life. It's just moving from one electronic currency to the other. And I think that it's very possible that we could see these Ponzi schemes continue for quite some time. One of the biggest mistakes that I've made is overestimating the intelligence of people. I've often overestimated. I figured back in 2015, I figured people would be able to figure out that Bitcoin could only do 7 transactions per second, that it wasn't anonymous at all. In fact, it's the most traceable currency to ever exist in the history of man, to my knowledge, except Ripple. Ripple's pretty dang traceable. You can see that Chris Larson sold or moved a bunch of Ripple right before it hit 70 cents, right before the SEC suing came down the pipe. You could see Jed McCaleb. You can see, he's got his name on his address, I think. Schwartz. He's got his Joel Katz is his Twitter name. I think he's got his Ripple address marked. But anyway, they're very, very traceable currencies. Where was I going with this? But anyway, people somehow still are so dim that they can't figure out that it cannot function as a currency, that it's constantly throwing money, that everyone is constantly paying a tax to the miners to keep the currency afloat, that if there are no miners, that, unlike gold, once you mine it out of the ground, it exists. You don't have to burn electricity to keep the gold from disappearing. Well, with Bitcoin, if you don't burn electricity, your Bitcoin literally, you can't move it. It probably exists on a hard drive somewhere, but that's a long story. And then you got to talk about consensus and whose hard drive is the right version and blah, 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 blah. But I'm starting to lose confidence that people will be able to recognize these Ponzi schemes for what they really are. And I think that Bitcoin's gone for, 11 years now? Bitcoin went for 11 years, and HEX is a more well-designed Ponzi scheme than Bitcoin, hands down. If there's one accolade you've got to give, it's that it's a well-designed Ponzi. And if Bitcoin could go for 11 years, maybe this Ponzi can go even longer than that. It's possible. I'm just very curious to see how the cashing out of these massive stakes, say at the 10-year mark, I don't know how they're going to support those outflows. It's obviously not there now. There's obviously not enough liquidity in the market to support that kind of an exit. It's simply not there. So in 10 years, when all these, mega whales, these giga whales who staked bajillions of coins, they're going to come due. And if, how is that going to happen? Somebody enlighten me. Somebody educate me. How are these massive stakes? Right now, if you want to cash out, there's only $6 million to cash out into. Like, that is microscopic compared to what has been injected into this market. Compared to what people put into this market, there's only $6 million left for people to cash out. It's microscopic. All the money's gone. It's been pocketed, right? It's been pocketed. Unless that money is sitting on the sidelines to act as some kind of economic relief, and one day in the future, maybe that'll happen, but I still don't think that's going to be enough. Maybe it will be. I don't see Ethereum being worth a terribly large amount in 10 years from now, because its only use case is to support Ponzi schemes like HEX. The only good project that I've seen on Ethereum is PaxG, and having a gold back ERC20 token is kind of an oxymoron, because the gold backing service is a centralized service. So why would you need to use a decentralized service as the front end for a centralized service? The only purpose of that is for money laundering and things like that. Otherwise, you would just use a centralized service and then use a centralized service front end. The fact that they're using a decentralized service front end, the only use case for that really is financial privacy and money laundering and illegal activity. So I made a video about that, about why PaxG is better than Monero. I don't advise doing any of that, but that's the only use case I can see for it. And I don't see any other use case for Ethereum other than powering these Ponzi schemes. I can't think of a single valid thing that Ethereum does. I don't think that it's improving anybody's lives at all, except for the people that got in early and are able to dump on the later people. It's improving their lives, but that's how Ponzi schemes work. The early people get rewarded, and the late people get left holding the bag. Same thing with HEX. So anyway, how long will this Ponzi scheme keep going? Probably for a while. Will it see 50 cents by the end of 2022? I would not doubt it. Probably we'll see it. My question, though, is once all these stakes, in 5 years or 10 years, when you start really getting a lot of stakes coming mature, who is going to cash these people out? The only way that they can be reasonably cashed out that I can think of is you have to have manic inflows. You have to have a ton of people coming into this Ponzi to support them getting out. And then when those people, all those manic people that came in 10 years from then, you've got to have even more people. Eventually, if you really walk the dog on this thing, let's assume HEX takes over the world and everybody in the world's using HEX. Eventually, you run out of new people. There's only so many people in the world. The world population is finite. So eventually, you run out of people to cash out the early guys, and you enter a price depression, or maybe a total outright collapse. Generally, Ponzi schemes collapse. That's how it goes. Anyway, I'm done rambling about Ponzi schemes for the day. I hope that you've come to a better understanding of why cryptos are generally Ponzi schemes and why stocks, real estate, and gold are not Ponzi schemes. I think I explained that pretty well. A lot of people just don't understand that, though. All right, I am out of battery, so see you all next time.